Hello, good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are we doing today? Trust we are all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we would be getting started today with Flask. We'll be learning a little bit about Flask. We'll be introducing ourselves to Flask basically. So I've prepared a slide for you all. Sorry, give me a minute. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Yes, I can see it.
All right, so let's get started. So this will be our first. Sorry, give me a minute. So okay. So we'll be having a brief introduction to Flask today. We'll be learning a few things about Flask, about the framework, the micro framework Flask. I believe every one of us here we're all familiar with Python very well, at least to some extent. Please, and then I'd like for this class to be as interactive as possible because we're all students here, all learning. So I can also learn from you. So if there's any question, if there's anything you have to say, please just raise your hand and let me know. All right. Hello. Yes. You cannot respond.
Hello, sir. I can hear you. I can hear you, sir.
Okay. So we'll get started with this. So these are the topics we'll be looking at today. A brief introduction to Flask. Then we'll be having a basic introduction to templating with Flask, the Jinja 2 template engine. Then we'll be looking at forms also. So what's Flask? Basically, Flask is a simple web framework. That's the simplest definition we can give for Flask. So now even now look, what is a web framework? Here we can say a web framework is a tool that provides you with libraries, with everything, basically everything you need to build a web application. That's what a web framework provides you. So basically, it's like you don't necessarily have to write all the low-level features that your web application is supposed to have. A web framework already abstracts all of that for you. So basically, you already have like some function or some classes that you can call. So once you call those classes, basically we'll be seeing some of those functions and classes here. So once you call them, your work will be a bit easier. So looking at Python generally, we have two popular frameworks. We have Django and we have Flask. So what differentiates Flask from Django basically is the fact that Flask is a micro framework. So a micro framework is pretty much a lightweight framework that ships with little to no dependencies. So basically, you have just enough to get you going. Then if whatever you need, whatever dependency you need, whatever feature you need, you can then install those dependencies as needed. So one of the interesting facts about Flask is that most of the dependencies we'll be using, we already have other developers that already created some of them, most of them actually. So we don't have to really necessarily write your own dependencies. But then sometimes you might have to write them. I've been in situations where I had to create my own dependencies. But for now, what you need majorly has been made available for us. So basically, Flask is a micro framework, so it doesn't have so much dependencies, but still, it ships with two major dependencies. When you install Flask on your laptop or your PC, okay, I believe we all know how to do that, right?
No, I don't.
Okay, installing anything generally with Python is not so hard as long as you have your Python well installed and you have your pip. You know what pip is now? Python package manager. I'm waiting for an answer. You guys know what pip is, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So basically,
Yes.
it's the same way you install any other package. Just simply pip install Flask as well. And though I would advise you create a virtual environment first. Basically, a virtual environment is like an isolated environment on your system, and it's very useful in case so that dependencies between different projects will not clash. Say, for instance, you are building a project that uses a particular version of a dependency, and then on some other projects, you have to use a different version. Things like this might cause errors when you're building. So it's best to have a secluded environment, a virtual environment, an isolated one, where you can build, and the dependencies for that particular project won't affect the whole system or any other projects, basically. So after installing Flask, two major dependencies ship with Flask, and those dependencies are, well, this. I don't know how to pronounce this, so let's just flow with it. It's a Wsji library. What is a Wsji library? Basically, a Wsji library is a protocol, or Wsji itself is a protocol that was created for Python applications to connect or to communicate with the web server. So basically, when you write a Python code, you go to your terminal, you run the file, and basically your code runs. But then when building web applications, you have to communicate with a web server over HTTP protocols. Yeah. So Python itself on its own cannot do that. But then they've come up with protocols, with a way to make things easier for us. This is one of the abstract talking about, where you don't have to necessarily implement all those low-level features. So this has been implemented. Basically, so WSGI is a protocol to communicate with web servers through HTTP protocols. So we'll get to, and the second major dependency is Jinja 2, the template engine. So okay, let me just skip that for now. We'll still talk more about Jinja 2 in this class. So is everyone following me? I'd like to hear responses, please.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so far we're clear now. You guys are following me.
No, I don't understand the meaning of dependencies. What do you mean by dependencies?
Dependencies. Okay. Basically, dependencies are like the features of the things things your web application depends on. It's as the name calls, and as the name says, dependencies. What your application depends on. So basically, let's use a real life scenario. You have a car, but to drive your car, you need to buy fuel. So basically, we can say your car on some levels depends on the fuel. So we can say fuel is a dependency of your car. You get?
Yeah,
Do you understand that now?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, these are the two major dependencies that comes with Flask. As we keep going, as we keep building, we would install some other dependencies, or well, I know there are Agba devs here, so you can actually write your own. But then the point is, Flask comes with just these two, as compared to Django, where most of the tools you need is already equipped with Django. But the thing about that is, it makes it really heavy. Flask is very lightweight, so it's used to build like cool applications where you don't really need so much dependencies. Say for instance, let's look at Django. If Django, okay, let's look at the mailing system now, for instance. Django ships with Django Mail, a way of sending mails to other people, yeah? But if, say, for instance, your application doesn't need that mailing feature, you still have the dependency installed or with your Django code. So basically, when you are deploying to the server, you are deploying everything. So that way, even code that you don't need or even features that you don't need are on. So basically, you get the idea of it being heavy. But with Flask, it's only exactly what you need that comes with these two are major dependencies that you're going to need. And then any other dependency you need, you get to install those ones yourself. So you install and ship. That way your code base is as light as possible. There's no redundancy and all that. So are you guys moving with me?
Yes,
Guys? Okay, good. So let's move on now. The next thing, let's introduce ourselves to Flask. Pretty much we'll build our very first application with Flask. So let's just get started here. So this is a simple Flask application. And allow me to tell you that with just this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, with just these 7 lines of code, we already have a web application. Just these 7 lines and your web application is running. Though at the end of the day, you still need to add some logic and all that. But then this alone works. So basically, if this is all you want your website to do, say when someone goes to your website, www.mywebsite.com, all they see is hello world. This is all that you need. Or this is, well, yeah, actually, this is all you need, because if you run this in the server now, and you go to the to your local host on port 5000, you would see a web page that says hello world. Just this little code snippet. So basically, that's the joy of Flask. Flask allows you to write code, create a web application in like a few lines of code, and you don't have to there are no redundancies, there are no code that you don't need. It's basically exactly what you need that you have here. So let's explain each line by line. So basically, to work with Flask, we have to import Flask from the Flask what's this called? The Flask module that we installed by using pip install Flask yet. So we import Flask itself, then we instantiate or we construct our Flask application here. We start our Flask application. Now, this app here doesn't have to be app. I thought I should say that you can use any name here. It's basically a variable. But beware that whatever you use here is what you use to create your route. No, it's the same. It's the same thing that is. So make sure though the all like try to say the convention. All code bases are worked with Flask. Mostly use app. So to just there's no except you have any other reason to app works very well.
No, I didn't.
Are you saying something? Okay. basically this takes the name of our file. So say for instance we named this file main.py. Flask takes that main.py name and constructs an application based on that. So here we have our application now. So simply put, once you've started your application, the next thing to do is to create your route. Now, to create routes in Flask, it uses this decorator convention with Python. Are you guys familiar with decorators in Python?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. So basically, the way to define a route, or the best way, the most common way to define a route is to do this. Your app, this art, or this, what's it called now? We just use art. So this art sign is what you use to symbolize the decorator. It always comes for any decorator in Python. So if you want to use a decorator, you put this art symbol, then whatever decorator you want to use. So here we'll be using this app, our app here, to define a route, and well, this route just leads to the home page. So like the root of the web app, that's the home page basically. So basically, now the way it works is once you, I think it's good that we are familiar with decorators. So decorators work this way. You can decorate a function basically by writing your decorator, and directly under the decorator you create your function. So basically, the decorator knows that okay, I'm decorating this particular function. So now this is one of the things I was saying with a web framework, that they abstract a lot of low level functionalities that you have to write. They abstract them away and they just give it to you. So basically, Flask already has a feature to create a route, or what we also know as a route is like an endpoint for us, basically a URL simply. So this decorator here creates a route at this URL, at this location, basically, and then maps that route to this function. So basically, whenever anyone visits the application and goes to the home page or the index page, they would see a block of text saying hello world. Basically, it's as simple as that. So like I said earlier, if all you want to do in your web application is to be saying hello, this already is a standard web application. Though there are still some, well, actually, yeah, well, there's no need for security issues, so this works. So now moving forward, this, well, we're familiar with Python now, so this line of code should, I believe. Yeah, guys, please let's respond.
Yes, it's familiar.
So with that, when we run our application with this line, app.run is as simple as that. Now, this debug equal to true here is basically telling our server that whenever someone goes, or whenever we run the server, whenever someone goes to a particular end, right, give us a log of things going on in the system or on the server. If there's an error, log it out. Whatever is happening, if say you visit this particular endpoint, log it out for us. Let us see. So this is good during development, basically. So when you are developing a web application, when you're working on a web application, if there's any issue, you can easily go to your log and trace your issue. Yeah, so it's like, and gives you an error log and you just quickly trace it. If this debug.tree is not there, it wouldn't give you an error log. It will just show you your error, but it won't log that way, like the steps, how the error was traced from the root of the error to the current situation. But then here's one thing you should note. In production, make sure this debug.true is in there. You guys get me? I'll say it again. In production, that's after you're done with building your project and you want to make sure you remove this debug equal to true. Reason being, when you deploy this to the server, it logs everything happening on the server. So basically, the hacker can come, check your log and see everything going on, and be able to, from there, well, a smart hacker can pick things up from there, and your server is compromised. So basically, one of the security implementations you shouldn't forget. Make sure you remove this debug equal true when you are pushing to production. So with that, I think we understand what's happening on this page, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yes, sir.
well, let's move to the next. Working with variables. So I know we are all familiar with variables in Python in every programming language. But yeah, variables here are well, actually, yeah. Let me put it this way. So variables in this context right now are used to build URL basically. So when you define a route, when you create a route and you define a function under that route, in the function scope, in the scope of that function, you can create variables like you usually do in your regular Python application. You can create a variable, make use of it however you want. But then there's also one which you can pass your what's it called, to your route. Now let's look at this. Look at this route here. It has a variable called name. Remember, in our first app here, it simply says hello world. When you go to the what's it called? When you go to the home page, all you see on your page is hello world. But here, you don't go necessarily to the home page. So let's say, for instance, the name of my website is www.mywebsite.com. So if I went to www.mywebsite.com, what I'll see on that page is hello world, right? But going to www.mywebsite.com/my name, for instance, my name is Damilare. So if I did mywebsite.com/Damilare, it takes whatever you put in the after the /. Remember now, this what's it called? These angle brackets here, or these tags that we are used to, they are used to define variables in your URL. So basically, this is telling these routes that okay, what there's going to be a name here after this /. So if you go to the website and you put mywebsite.com/Daniel, you get whatever. I would explain that. So basically, this part is just telling you that okay, you have to put a name. The name is the variable name, and then the value of the variable is whatever you put in. So when you do that, say I put Damilare, for instance, this function takes that variable Damilare and passes it into this return statement. So now when I go to mywebsites.com/Damilare, what I see is hello Damilare. I'm sure we are familiar with this convention in Python too now. Yeah, guys.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
basically,
Yes.
this just prints out hello Damilare. If you put mywebsite.com/Daniel, you get hello Daniel. Whatever, if you put your name, whatever name you put, this takes the variable, the function takes the variable passed from the endpoint. Then whatever you do, then it works the same way you would work with a parameter in Python. If you declare a function, you add a parameter to the function, then you work with that parameter inside the function. So basically, you are returning a string with the name. So instead of having hello world as it was in the first one, now we have hello Damilare. Are we clear with this?
Quick question. Instead of using these string formats, can we use the F string format?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So any other question?
Yes, the at app.root, it wasn't really clear. Like when you're talking about what do you call it?
Decoration.
Decorations. So it wasn't. Is it that the decoration is decorating the function, or is
Exactly.
decorating the file?
Is decorating the function. So the way decorators works here is sometimes you have decorators that are already defined. For instance, in this particular scenario, in this context, they've defined a decorator for us. That's the developers that created Flask. So all we have to do is just use it, make use of it. But many a times you might even have to create your own decorators. But that's not what we are facing right now. So basically, we have our decorator. A decorator is used to decorate or to enhance a function, basically. You get, in this scenario, in this context, the decorator is telling this function, or the decorator is creating a route. Basically, a route is an endpoint. You guys know what endpoints are? A resource.
Yeah.
Good. So it creates a resource that has this particular URL. So my website.com/ whatever name you put. So now, but the decorator is directly above this hello function. So it is saying this particular endpoint is for this function. Yet, if I came to this line, this decorator line, and I pressed enter, and I put another function, the decorator will no longer work for this hello function. It will work for that particular function. You get me?
Okay. Yeah.
So the decorator that is directly ahead of it, or directly on top of the function, basically decorates the function, enhances the function, gives the functions more functionality, more features and more functionality, basically. So we're clear with that now.
So it creates a route and say this route, when you go to this route, call this function under.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. All right. So any other question? Go move ahead. Okay. It's without any other, we'll move to the next, building URLs. So on some level, we're still talking about variables here. But then now building URLs, say, okay, for instance, now, in Python, when you declare a function, so you declare a function that finds if a number is odd or even, right? And then returns true or false. You can now create another function, and in that function, call the function you created earlier, right?
Yeah.
Flask, or generally in web application, you wouldn't want to call a function. Why? Because in your function, while you're working, the way it works is you're either rendering templates or redirecting to a URL. We'll get to that in a bit. So when you're redirecting to a URL, you don't want to redirect to the function. You want to redirect to the route. You guys remember now this route that we created on top, this one here. You want to redirect to the route. And like you said earlier, once you call this route, the function under would yeah. So basically, you are trying to build URL. Yeah, we already have a URL, but say in another function, you want to use this resource or this endpoint in another function. You can't directly call this this resource. So you have to build a URL for that particular function. And Flask has given us function or tools to build a URL. So basically, this is a simple code example for building URL. Okay, sorry, you guys should please note. Yeah, the import is not complete. I'm supposed to import redirect and URL4. You can see this URL4 here now.
Yes.
So you're supposed to import it also. Sorry, my bad for not adding it. So just take note of that. So now back to this. So like I was saying, let's assume we have a endpoint, the home page.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Want to be importing Flask also?
Yeah, I just did that because we already imported it here. I don't want to like be writing and rewriting.
Okay, thanks.
Already installed, but then Flask made use of that. So you guys just understand. Once you started the application, yeah, this place just add redirect to Flask. You don't from Flask import Flask, so just add redirect and URL4. Are we clear?
Okay.
Okay, good. So now going back to this, say for instance, we have this endpoint, the home page, the index endpoint, the index, basically.
Excuse me.
Okay.
You said we should add redirect and URL4. Instead of doing that, can't we just use the star operator? So we have everything.
That is not advisable. Basically, it's not advisable to do a general import of. Just import the things you need.
Okay.
as much as possible, import just what you need. Are we clear about that?
Yeah.
As much as possible, please. I mean, it will work if you do that. It will work, but it's not advisable to do that. All right.
Yeah.
Good. So moving forward, so we have these endpoints now. That when you go to the endpoint, it returns a text hello admin, right? Now we have another endpoint here that you have to add your name, like the previous endpoint we looked at. Then instead of saying hello admin, it says hello. Sorry, this guest here is supposed to be name. My bad. So say hello name. Please take notes. Guest here is supposed to be name. You get?
Yeah.
Good. So now we have these two endpoints or these two resources. Say now in another resource, we now want to be specific. This is just this. Well, this particular scenario might not really. Sorry about that. Okay, so this particular scenario might not really have a use case, but it's just to explain the whole idea to us. Yet. So now we've looked at this scenario. Okay, now we go to the route. No, our website, the name of our website is mywebsite.com. So now I go to the endpoint mywebsite.com/hello/name. This name, as we remember, is a variable that stands for whatever name we put there, right? Guys.
Yeah, we understand.
Yeah.
Yes, we understand.
So now what this particular endpoint does is, if the name you put, like I said, you can put any name. So if, for instance, name you put is admin, you don't want to have to rewrite return hello admin. No, in this situation, it's just a single line. So you could have actually written it here. However, when we are dealing with real life applications, we're going to be having like one endpoint or one resource will probably have like a couple lines of code contains the logic for that particular resource. Get. So basically, instead of now rewriting that, you can just do redirect URL for index. So basically, what URL for does is it takes the function you passed here, which is index, this one here, and then it builds a URL based on this function. To simply explain it, it just takes the function, then goes to the route and builds a URL based on that route. You guys get that?
Say it one more time.
Okay. Simply, you want to redirect. No, redirect. You have to, when you are using redirect, you have to use a URL. You can't redirect to a function. Okay. So, but then you have your function name index. You can't start typing here mywebsite.com/whatever for the resource. So instead of doing that, you already know that the name of your function is index. URL for is a function given to us by Flask. So all we do is pass the name of the function to URL for, and URL for creates the URL for that function.
Okay.
So simply put, it redirects to the URL for index.
Okay.
So well, the what's it called? The main syntax for using URL for is the name of the function, and if that particular function has a variable. For instance, here now that we are specific about the name, we want to say hello Damilare, for instance. So a way of passing, this name has to be in our URL, right?
Yes.
So a way of passing the name to that particular URL here is to first state the name, the function name, hello. So URL for hello, where name equals name. So when this happens, it will just, whatever name you pass here in this place, it will take it as a parameter here, pass it to this variable here, and then come to this URL, and you now say hello, so hello Damilare.
Okay.
So it's really quite easy. Are you guys following me? Are you guys cool? Is there any question? No question.
No
No
question.
question.
There's one question, sir.
Okay.
What's the difference between URL for index and URL for hello name equals name?
Okay, good. URL for index, like I said, URL for takes the name of your function. Right?
And
So URL for index, yeah, it takes the name of a function, and if there's a variable, the variable. But for this index now, there's no variable here.
okay.
So there's no need for you to create a variable since the endpoint does not need any variable.
Okay.
But for our hello, this URL for hello function, the hello function
Okay.
requires a variable.
It's a variable. Okay.
So that's why we have to pass this. If hello doesn't require a variable, we won't need to pass this one here.
Okay.
Great. So with that, that's just basically like simplest explanation to URL for, and this is basically all you need to build URL. There are other ways to use it. I mean, there are like options, but then this is the most used. This is the most, personally, I feel this is the most efficient. All that. So basically, everyone understands. Like, if you see this block of code now, you understand what. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's move on to the next. So you remember earlier I was talking about HTTP protocols. Remember our WSGI, right? Who can remind us what WSGI is?
WSGI is what connects us to the server.
Okay, that's a really simple and great explanation. So it helps us to communicate with the server over the protocols, basically. So the HTTP protocols that I've been saying now, what is these are like the most popular. There are a lot more than this, but these are like the ones you use the most majorly. So get basically it's just this is just to send data in like should just explain it simply. It is used to fetch a resource or fetch data from the server, basically. So let's say you go to google.com, for instance, and in the search bar, you input Flask. You want to search on Flask. What you are telling that form, that search bar to do is go to the server and go and fetch any data or information about Flask. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Yes,
Great.
sir.
So that particular form, that search bar, if I don't know if most of us are working with, if you check the source code, you see that the form is a get form. It's sending a get request. Basically, it's fetching data, it's fetching information from the server and returning it back to you. So the next one, edge. Edge basically contains like, sorry?
Okay, even Bracco did too.
Okay, sorry, if you are like having another conversation, please can you mute your mic so you don't distract us? Okay, so the head basically contains like the configurations for our request. So you are sending a get request, there's a header for it. Sending the post request, there's a header for it. So it contains basically, let's just put it that way. Request is used to send forms to the server, data to the server. So basically, let's say you go to facebook.com, for instance, and you want to even say this. This is even interesting. So you put in your username, your email address, and your password. For sensitive information like that, you use a post request. Why? Because a post request will encrypt that data and send it to the server without showing well, anybody, without anybody other than yourself and the server having access to it. So say for instance, you used a GET request. In our GET request now, say in our search bar, when you type Flask, you guys, you notice when you go on Google and you type whatever query you want to type, that query is added to the end of your URL. Abi?
Yes.
So when you type, you go on Google and type Flask, you see www.google.com/q stands for query and whatever there's some punctuation marks you see there. I don't know them offhand. Then you see Flask. So basically, if you have a login form and instead of using a post, use a post protocol, use GET, what will happen is when you submit that form on your URL, your username and your password would be showing there. So basically, anyone that has access to that URL automatically gets your information, your sensitive information. That is why a post request is needed when you are dealing with sensitive information. Basically, a post request does not add your queries or your data, whatever data you fill into the form in the URL. It sends it using a form, basically. So you can work with that form. When your server receives the form, you probably have written a logic to work with that form. We'll get to that as we go on. So basically, that's what a post request does. Now, a put request, well, talking about security and everything, a put request works the same way as a post request in the sense that your information is not open to others, it's secure and all. But a put request itself is used to edit data or information on the server. So say for instance, you have your profile, you go to your profile on Facebook, for instance, and you want to edit your, I don't know, you want to edit your say your date of birth or something. The form itself that you're using to edit, it uses a put request. So basically, just simply put, when you are trying to edit data when you're trying to create new data that is not already on your server, you use a post request. But when you already have your information on the server and you're trying to edit that information, that's when you use a put request. Okay?
Yes, I understand.
Yes.
Okay, great. Then delete, well, as it sounds, delete is basically to delete your information from the server. So you're trying to delete your account from whatever website you are or whatever web application you're using. The well, for most, without actually delete, you just render your account inactive. But then right now we're talking about HTTP protocol. So basically, delete protocol, what it does is to delete information or delete data the server from the database, basically. So that's quite simple. So with that, I think you get an angle of HTTP. You can go online and read more on HTTP protocol. There are things you use as you go on. I think we'll see one or two examples of that here. Today's part. So now let's move on to the second topic, templates. So first question is what are templates? So let's look at say for instance, let's go back to this. If all you want is for your web app to return hello admin, this works. But in a situation where, in real life situations, where we build web apps that would contain a lot of HTML, a lot of text, a lot of static content, you don't want to start typing it out here. Return, then you now write your HTML, your body, your head, your body, everything. You guys work with, you guys know how HTML works now.
Yes.
Good. So instead of having to type all of that here, you can create a sort of template. The template now is like a layout for your pages. So basically, on your web app, mostly there might be a lot of static content on your web app. Say like, okay, now let's say your web app it tells a story, but then basically the story it tells is based on the user that is logged in. So it says, hello, Damilare, how are you doing today? Sha uses a lot of static content, but then there are some places where the content has to be dynamic, right? So what it does is you create a template that basically contains all your static content. You get all the content that will not be changing, the content that will remain the same. That if I go to that website as Damilare, it's the same thing I see. That if someone else goes to the website, it's the same thing. But then now, we have, like I said, there will be some content on that web page that will be dynamic. Basically, that will change based on whoever is working. Like the way you go to your Facebook page or Instagram page, and your feed is different from my feed, because your feed is based on your followers or people you are following, and mine is based on people I'm following, basically. So that is the dynamic content. Now, there is a way to pass, and basically, you get dynamic content from the backend, from the database, most times, from your backend logic, and then you send that to the front end, to your template. So now there's an engine that helps us to do that, that helps us to send to create templates that can accept that can accept this dynamic content. Now that engine is called Ginger 2. Okay, but before we get to Ginger 2, let's look at rendering templates with Flask. So the simplest way to render a template with Flask is we import render template. Basically, simply render template. So now look at this endpoint, this index endpoint. Earlier, our index endpoint said hello admin, right? But here, our index is rendering a template called index.html. Now, before I move ahead, I'd like to say, when you are creating your template, you have to you create a folder named templates, and all your template files will be in that folder. Now, you have to make sure that that folder is in the same directory as your application, as your Flask, as your Python file where you're writing your Flask application. The folder and your Python app, say you name it main.py, will be in the same directory. And inside that templates folder, templates directory, you now have all your templates. So basically, in our templates, let's assume now, in our templates directory, we have a template called index.html. And in our index.html, we've gone to write the HTML earlier. That, okay, what is index.html? What is there is hello admin. So simply, whenever someone goes to this route, instead of having to do return hello admin, it just renders this HTML file for them. Now, all the rendering and all has been taken care of by Flask using this particular render template function. All right. So give me a minute. I think people are trying to join here. Okay. So let's get back to this. So are we understanding what I'm saying?
Yes, I following.
Good.
So,
So
Yes, I
basically,
follow.
the index.html, you said it has to be in the same directory as your Flask app, your Flask file.
no, please don't what's the word? The Flask file. Let's say this particular file we are looking at now. Let's say we named it main.py. All right. Now, in that same directory where your main.py is, you create a directory called templates.
Okay.
All right. Now, in that template directory is where you now have your index.html.
Okay.
So your main file is in the same directory as your template directory. Your files are inside that template directory, not inside the root folder itself.
So are we not supposed to indicate it before the index.html, the templates?
You don't have to. That render template already takes care of that. The convention for Flask is once you call this render template, it looks for a directory called templates first.
Okay.
Then inside that directory, it now looks for whatever file you specified here.
Okay.
So basically now, for now, our index.html might probably just contain hello admin. But in a real world situation where your index maybe you are building a website for your company, and your index.html contains the landing page for the company. It contains a lot of information. You wouldn't have to write everything here in your Python file. You've already created an HTML. We already work with HTML now, so we know how HTML works. So you've created your HTML file. So all you have to do is just render this template. So whenever anyone goes to www.mywebsite.com, automatically they get the HTML file in front of them. You get? Are we clear?
Yeah.
Now, but then there's still more to it in the sense of now, what about a route that has a variable? You know, earlier here, what we did was to return hello, then the variable name, then we just see hello Damilare or hello, whatever name you put there. But yeah, now we're no longer returning the raw text in Python. We are rendering templates. So let's say in our what's it called? In our hello.html file now, we have a story, for instance. I like to use a story because it's a situation where you use, let's say, my name is Tom. I am 12 years old. Then you now say Tom does so. Instead of having to write Tom over and over and over again, this is where variables come in now. You guys already work with variables in Python, so you know. So basically, in a hello.html, we would create the story or whatever it is we want to put on that page. Then there's now a syntax, a particular syntax. Would get to that in a bit. That's Ginger 2, a way of getting variables from your resource or from your endpoint, from your backend, and rendering it in a template. But before we get to that, you have to first send that variable here. So this one works the same way as our URL4 works. Hope you've not forgotten URL4 now. Guys?
No, I have not forgotten.
Okay, great. So, with URL4, you pass in the function name and your variable. You pass in your HTML file or your template file and the variable. Okay?
Yeah.
Are we clear?
Yeah, we're clear.
Okay, great. But right now, if you went to your HTML file, if you create a regular HTML file, like the way we are used to creating HTML files, you won't be able to make use of this name. So this is where Ginger 2 comes in. Ginger 2 is a way of, is like pretty much, it was created for Python, basically, where you can write Python expressions. So simply put, Ginger 2 is a fast, expressive, extensible templating engine. Special placeholders in the template allow writing code similar to Python syntax. So basically what they are saying is you can write some of the code you can write in Python, in your Python file, in HTML files. That being said, Ginger 2 is not just for HTML. All right. Ginger 2 is basically for markup format documents. So you can work with HTML, you can work with XML, can work with any other markup format. But here we are building a web application now. So we are working with HTML. So basically, Ginger 2 creates for us some placeholders that allows us to write Pythonic syntax. So basically, in Python, you can declare a variable, make use of that variable. So going back here, this variable that we have here, that we've sent with our template, basically Ginger 2 allows us to call or to use that variable in our HTML file. Now, it's not limited to that. There's a lot more you can do with Ginger 2. You can write different statements, like you see here. These are the two major syntax we'll be using for Ginger 2. To write statements here like conditional statements, you have to put it in this, what's it called? Well, in these placeholders or these tags. So basically, these 3 dots is what like your Python syntax, your Python code. Then whatever the Python you write, you close it. Then for this is used for expressions and variables. We'd see how this works in the next slide. So basically, let's just see how Ginger 2 is. So simply put, now let's look at this particular block of code first. So you remember here, what we did here is we rendered the template hello.html and we passed in this variable name to it. Okay. Guys, are you following?
Yes,
I
we are
am.
following.
Good.
Yes,
So
we are
now
following.
this variable name here, now this is, you now come here and make use of it here. So initially, if these two tags, these curly braces, if are not there, and you just typed name, when you go to the HTML file, or when you go to your web app to go to that endpoint, all you see is hello name. Now this two, like is for expressions and variables. Basically allows you to make use of variables or to write expressions that follow the Python syntax. So basically, in Python, you can just, if you have a variable name equals Damilare, you can pretty much just type name somewhere or say print name and it will print out Damilare. You get. So that's the same thing it's doing here. This is the syntax for writing variables. Two curly braces, your variable or your expression, then you close the curly braces. So this is the simplest, or this is a very simple Jinja 2 template. This curly braces is thanks, or the feature of this happening is thanks to Jinja 2. It's Jinja 2 that is making it possible for us to be able to use this variable here, and instead of HTML file giving us name or hello name, to give us hello, then whatever name we pass. Are we clear with that?
Yes.
Good. So there's still a lot more to Jinja 2, but then let's move forward. So now, another thing we can do in Jinja 2 is we can write, statements or expressions. Look at this now. This is pure Python for name in list example. This is just an example you get. So to write a for loop, the way to do it is to create a curly braces, like it said here. For statements, we have a curly brace, a percentage sign, then whatever statements we want to have, then we close it. So basically, we have our curly braces, our percentage sign, and then the the statement. So yeah, let's say for instance, from the back end, we passed in a list of names, right? And we want our, say basically, let's say you queried your database and you say you got all the list of names or all the list of all the staff in your company, for instance, and then you've now passed that list. When you were rendering the template, you pass that list as a variable to the front end. So now you want to print out, or you want to list out all the names in that list. In Python, the best way to do that is to use a for loop, or a good way to do that is to use a for loop. So basically, you can just do for name in list example. Then we still remember this one now. This name, like we know in Python, is like a variable that holds each value in this list. So just create a list item for each name. So if there are like 10 names, instead of having to write 10 different lines of code for list item, then name, then close it, then do that 10 times. This does it for us. So if there are 1,000,000 names, when you go to this web page now, you would see 1,000,000 names on the page. But all you had to write was just one single line here. So that is one of the special effects of what's it called, of Python, of Jinja 2, sorry. So, but let us also keep in mind that when we are using, let me just put it this way, whenever you are using this syntax, that's for statements, this curly brace and the percentage sign, always make sure you end it. So basically, this works for statements, for conditional statements, for if statements. You can use it when you are doing template inheritance. We get to that in a little bit. You can use it for blocks. Yeah, that's still under template inheritance. But basically, what you have to make sure of is once you define something like this, make sure you end it. If you don't, your what's it called? Your server will log out, it will give you an error, basically. So even if you forget, as long as even if your debug is not on Zoom work, but you won't be able to see where the error is. But then just keep it in mind that you always have to end this for. Let's look at another example for a if statement.
Sorry, I have a question.
Okay.
When you were explaining the for me in this example, you said
Yeah.
that before then you would have queried database. Like this is the second time I've mentioned query. What do you mean by querying a database? Like you also mentioned query when you were explaining URLs.
Yeah, sorry, that's just like a terminology we use. So basically, querying a database is like trying to get data. You write a what's it called, like a block or a line of code to tell your database or give your database instructions. Basically, you're saying, oh yeah, database will give me a list of all the names of staff in my company. You won't be writing like that. In the end, you'll be writing is probably using SQL or using
Sorry.
a
So good evening, everyone. I just joined recently. So basically, you are saying the querying of databases is that you are trying to extract data from like a large data set, right?
yeah, well, yeah, you can put it that way. Querying does not necessarily mean getting. Sometimes it can be writing to database.
Okay.
Right? It can be like adding data to your database, can be getting data from your database, can be editing data in your database. Yeah.
Are we also going to learn that?
Yeah, definitely. But that's not today, Sha. As the class goes on, we'll get to that.
Okay.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
Yeah. Sorry, just to ask this one once and for please, are we going to get access to these slides so that just for
I'm not sure about that yet, but I think I would ask and I'll let you know.
all right,
You guys
thank
are
you very much.
the Slack channel now.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'll drop the information there.
Okay.
All right, great. So the way it works, good. So now you've seen this block of code, this if statement. So simply put, this is just take this for now. So let's say if you want to check if a user is logged in, if user dot logged in, on some levels, this is probably not how it's going to be. When if we're working with Flask login, we'll probably be doing if user dot is authenticated, all of that. But we'll get all of that later. But for now, let's just say this just checks. Let's just assume that this line checks if your user is logged in. All right. So if user is logged in, we want to create a link that says logout. Now, before we go any further, you guys remember building URLs now? I remember that we use URL for to build URL. Abi? Guys, okay. If you want to say anything, please unmute your mic, say what you want to say, and mute your mic back, so you don't distract us. All right. Oh, interesting. Seems I can't add this person. Okay. So like I was saying, you guys remember how to build URLs now?
Yeah.
And what was the thing I said you would pass to your URL to the URL for function to build a URL?
The function. The function name.
So
You pass only the function name if the function does not require a variable. But if the function requires a variable, you pass both the function name and the variable.
amazing. That's very good. That's the correct answer. So basically now, yeah, in this context, we are working with, let's say now we've checked if our user is logged in, we want to log the user out. Now, we would have created a function with or an endpoint or a resource that logs a user out. And we've named that function logout. All right. So yeah, to now create, basically it's a URL that we have to click on in HTML. For links, you have to pass in a URL to your href. You can't pass in the function itself. So yeah, but then remember URL4 is a Pythonic code. It's not HTML. So you can't just write raw URL for logout. You have to put it in this curly braces, which now forms as an expression. So basically, this is a Python expression that we are writing inside our HTML file. So basically, what this does is to build a URL for logout. So whenever anyone clicks on logout, like we already know, it calls the function associated to that URL and performs the logic, and whatever happens after that, if it's to render a new template, it's to render. Whatever happens, you guys get the vibe. Okay. All right, guys.
Yeah.
Good. And like I said, don't forget your block of code or your statements and if. Now, let's look at template inheritance. So this is like, say for instance, you are building a web app that has about 5 pages, like home page, about us page, our services, blah, 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 things like that. You get. And for instance, there are some things that are going to be on every page that is going to be the same. E.g., our nav bar is going to be the same across all pages. Our footer is going to be the same across all pages, right? And maybe any other thing that you want to add to your website that you know is going to appear on every page. It's going to be there, right? So instead of having to go to each of our HTML file and start writing, you write your nav bar, you write the content specific to that particular HTML file, then write your footer. Then you go to another HTML file, you do the same thing. That's just, you're just stressing yourself. You're just wasting time. You're just making your code redundant. You're just clogging up everything. A simple way to do it, we all know, at least I can assume we've worked with classes in Python now. So we know about inheritance. Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. So it works the same way. So we can create a single HTML file that contains all the things that would be available across all the pages. Let's say, for instance, we name that HTML file base.html. Now, in our base.html, we have our index, we have our navigation, we have our footer, and whatever else you want to add that is going to be on every page. Simply, once you've created that page, you are going to want to add extra content to the page, right? Because the way it works is you are going to be inheriting from that page. And you guys know in Python, for instance, now, when you are inheriting from a class and you want to say you are creating a new class that has inherited from a previous class, I now want to create a constructor for that class. You first have to use a super, like you have to, what's the word? You have to take note of the constructor for the class you are inheriting from, right? You guys get me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
boss.
So it's the same way it works here. So let's just assume this nav.html was just a simple block of code, but let's assume these are base.html, this lower part of the screen. So let's say we have our nav bar now, and then we have our nav bar, we have our footer. Now we want to add content in between the nav bar and the footer, right? That's like going to be the main content of the page. That's going to be specific for each page. The way to do it in our base.html, we'll define a block. This is a way to these 2 lines here, keep in mind, is a way to define a block. So you can say block content. Just bear with me for now because of this. Then end block. And that's all, just these 2 lines. If you want to add, say, okay, now in our base.html file, for instance, we've most times what we do usually is to import our CSS files, our JavaScript files, that we are using across all pages, what we do usually is to import them in our base.html file. All right. But if now, for instance, you now want to create, say on your contact us page, or say you have a gallery on your website, a page for images and videos. You now want to create a style specific to that page. You don't want to add the style for every page on the website, or you don't want every page to inherit that style, even though they're not going to make use of it. You just want that your particular page to use it. What you can do is block CSS, like the same way this works. You do your block CSS. You don't have to name it CSS. You can name it whatever you want, but it's best to name it according to what you are trying to add. So here now, let's say hypothetical, we are trying to add a CSS file for just that particular page. So in our base.html, we've written, let's assume these two are like CSS files that works for the whole website. Then we now want to add a CSS file for that particular page. We'll do this. Then we now go to that page itself. Say now, let's assume this one down here is base.html, and now this one up here is gallery.html. This is the page that contains our gallery. Now, first things first, to be able to make use of this base.html, to be able to have all the features, this one are like your navbar, your footer that I've already defined here. What you have to do first, at the top of your code, at the top of your HTML file, you have to write this block of code here. Extends, here it will be base.html, whatever you decide to name it. You are just telling this file, this in our situation of gallery.html, I'm telling your gallery to extend base.html. So doing just this has already given you access to your footer, to your navbar, to everything. So you don't have to go and be writing all of that again in this new HTML file. Once you've extended it here, you already have everything written in one file here. So you can go to another HTML file, write the same thing. You get. So instead of having to write like say 30, 40, 50 lines of HTML, all you have to do is just write this Ginger templates syntax and you're good. Are you clear on that?
Yes, boss.
Good. So now, you remember in this, we are still assuming this our CSS. But that's the shift. Okay, great. So now we want to add our CSS file in our assumed gallery.html file. Yeah. So what we do is we now do block. We now call the name we gave it here. You know, we said CSS. We now call the same name, put it here. Then whatever we now want to put in our CSS, like link, href, whatever it is, to be in between this block and this end. Now, in this particular scenario, we have a navigation, the navbar. This link leads to home. This link leads to about. But let's say in let's say in our application, on the home page, you don't want to show login and logout. Okay, you don't want to show home about. Then maybe you now want to show admin. It's when they now click on admin that now show login and logout. So yeah, you don't want to write it, but at the same time, you have to provision a space for it to be in your navbar. So now you've created a block for it here. So when you now go to the particular file you want to use that, you want to add the extra extra links. What you do, like I said earlier, you do block whatever name you gave it here. Now we are talking about the navbar. You put it here, then you do your end block. Then in between these two, you now put in whatever you want to put in. So you can put in logout, you can put in another link, login, you can put in another link, register. You get basically. But the idea is you don't want to show these links on this page or in the general page. You just want those links to be specific to this. You can go to another page and create new links with this same syntax, block nav. end block, then the link. And the link might not be login logout, it might be something else. It might be maybe you're creating an e-commerce website now. You can do I don't know, payments, get your receipt or something like that. This logout now would not show on that other web page. Whatever link you put on that other web page will not show on this particular web page. Only the things that are in your general or your base file would show everywhere. Apart from that, the things you put in specific files are only specific to that file. Have I been able to pass across the message well?
Understand?
Guys,
It's not clear, sir. It's not clear.
can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Do
we
you
can
guys
hear you.
understand why I just explained?
I don't really
Yes.
understand. I don't understand.
Not so clear. Okay, what part is not clear? What do you need me to shed more light on?
We are talking about inheritance still, right? Template inheritance.
Why is this taking so long?
Can you hear me? Hello.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I said you were talking about template inheritance, right?
Hey guys, what's this? Yeah, I can hear you.
I said you were talking about template inheritance, right?
Sorry, my network is messing up a bit. Give me a little bit.
Okay, I said you were talking about template inheritance. Am I correct? I guess the network is bad. Is there a chat box I can use?
No, why is it in there? This one?
Is anybody still here?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Since the network is down. Mm. Sorry, I can't hear anybody. Like, is anyone speaking at all?
Can you hear me?
Currently, nobody is
I
speaking.
can hear you.
Okay. I'm still here.
Sorry, is anybody still on or in the meeting?
Yes, you are still here.
Yes, I am still in the meeting.
Waiting for the.
Okay. All right.